You've probably come across quiz apps like Trivia Crack and Quizlet. Today, we'll be building our very own quiz app using JavaScript. This is the demo of the quiz app. Now, let's get to work. So we currently have a HTML file with a boilerplate code, an empty JavaScript and CSS file. So I'll start by creating a H1 that says quiz form. Then I'll create a div with an ID of quiz form container. This will contain all our form for our quizzes. Next, I'll create our first form. Then I'll add a p tag. This p tag will hold the question for our quiz. I'll also add a div with a class of options container. This will contain all the options for our question. For each option, we'll wrap it around a label. Then we'll add an input with a type of radio. We'll add in an ID attribute and also a name attribute. We'll also set our input to required. Then we'll add a text for the option and also set it to the value of our input button. Then we'll also have to make several options with different ID and different values, but the same name. Next, we'll also have to add our previous and next buttons, but we'll use a line break to separate these. Then we'll use a div of class button container. This will contain our previous and next button, but our next button will also be our submit button. So this is what we have now. But we wouldn't want to have just one question. We want to have multiple of these. So let's head over to our HTML and do that. I'll just copy our form and duplicate this several times. Now we have multiple questions. But wait, wouldn't we want to generate our questions from JavaScript? Let's rewind. Hold on. Before we generate our forms with JavaScript, let's give our form a little bit of styling. We'll head out our CSS file and just paste in some styling. Link in the description, or you can always write your own custom styling. Let's preview this in the browser. Looking good. So now we can work on generating our forms from JavaScript, and we'll select our quiz form containers. Remember, this is the div that holds all our forms. I'll paste in an array of question objects. Now each object has a question, an array of options, and also the correct option. Next, we'll create a function called construct quiz form. This function will have the responsibility of creating all our forms using the questions. We'll loop through our quiz data array and append to our quiz form container a quiz form. We'll just cut that from our HTML file and paste it here, but with some few modifications. First, our p tag which contains our question, we are going to cut that out and replace it with our question from our quiz object. Next, we'll also have to change the label and get it from our quiz object. So we'll cut that out and we are going to be getting our labels from our options list. But we can't loop through an option in a string directly, so we are going to be doing that from another function. We'll be calling this construct HTML options. It's going to take in the options. First thing we'll do is instantiate a HTML options array. We'll see why we'll need that in a bit. Next, we are going to loop through our options array. Then we'll append an options to our HTML options array, but with some few modifications. But before that, we'll just return our HTML options, not as a list, but as a string. So we'll be using the .join method to convert that to a string. So we'll replace our options1 text to our actual option. We'll also change our ID from option 1 to option using the index, and we'll also add in our option to the ID. And we'll replace that also in the for attributes. We'll also set our value to our option and make our input required. Now we'll call our construct HTML options function from our construct quiz form function. We'll just pass in our quiz.options. Let's just call our construct quiz form function and see if it works in our browser. Okay, we got all our equations generated with their different options, but I see some few things going wrong here. First of all, our first question is having a previous button. I don't think that should be. And also our last question is also having a next button, but there is no next question. What we'll rather do is say submit rather than next. So let's go fix that. So we'll cut out our previous button and we'll only display it if the index is greater than 0. That means if the question is not the first question. Else we'll just return an empty string. So that works. We'll also have to work on the last next button. So we'll be using almost the same syntax. We'll be displaying submit if the question index is equal to the last question, which is quiz data.length minus 1, else we'll just be displaying next. So that works. We have a submit button rather than next in the last quiz, and we have a next button in all the rest ones. Now from our original quiz, we only display just one question at first and show the rest when you click on the next button. But currently we have all our questions displayed at once. So to fix that, we'll head out to our CSS file, and from our quiz form container, we'll set our display to flex, which will stack all our forms horizontally. Our quiz form container has a max width of 500 pixels. So setting our overflow X property to hidden will hide out all our rest forms. That looks good, I'll say. Now we want to show our next question when you click on the next button, which is also our submit button. Remember? At least now you remember. So instead of adding an on-click event listener to our button, we'll be adding an on-submit event listener to our form. We'll do that by querying all our forms, then looping through them, and adding an on-submit event listener to each of them. This will call a function that will have the responsibility in moving our form to the next question. But before that, we'll have to prevent our form from refreshing our page by using the event.preventListener function. Next, before we slide to the next question, we want to store our checked option. So we'll query all our radio input in our form, and we'll convert this to an array by spreading it in an array function. We'll do this so we can use the .find method to find the radio button that has been checked. I feel like Aristotle now after writing such a long syntax. Once we get the radio button that has been checked, we'll want to store it somewhere. So we'll scroll up to the top of our page and we'll create a select option variable that hold all our selected options. This will be in the form of an array. So we'll append our checked option to our selected option array using our question index. But how do we know our question index? So what we'll do is we'll head over to our form and we'll add in a data attribute called question index, and we'll be storing here the index of each of our question. So now we can easily pass in our form.dataset.questionIndex directly to our selected option and set this to our checked option.value. Now you might be asking yourself, why didn't I just use the .push function to append to the selected option array? Now here's the reason. If I always append to our selected option array, when I'm answering my questions and I click the previous button, instead of the previous button to edit this answer in the selected option array, it will just append to that list. So to prevent that, that's why we are indexing the question and reassigning it to the new checked option. Back to the video. Now after we've successfully stored our checked option, we'll have to scroll to the next question. So we'll use our quiz form container, scroll left, and we'll scroll left by the size of the container, which is 500 pixels. So this will take us to the next question. Let's try this, and it works. So when we get to our last question, it will still try to scroll to the next question rather than submitting it. So to remedy that, before we scroll, we'll have to check if our question is the last question using the question index data attribute. So if that's the last question, we are going to call a calculate answer function, which we'll create later. Else, that's when we are going to scroll our page. Now let's create our calculate answer function. Before we start calculating the answers, we'll have to initialize our points to 0. Next, we'll loop through our quiz data. Next, we'll have to check if our selected option indexing the question is equal to our question's original answer, getting that from our correct property. If the selected answer is correct, we are going to increment the points by 1. After all the calculations, we are going to set the inner HTML of our quiz form container to a p tag of an ID of results, and all we are going to say is you scored the points out of the total number of questions available, which is quiz data.length. Now let's test this out. So I'm going to go ahead and answer all our question here. So I made a little bit of tiny mistake. Instead of minusing by 1, I minus by 0. So let's fix that and try out the form again. So everything is working perfectly. I get my score. That's nice. Let's try going through our quiz again. Let me also try going back. Oh, we forgot to work on our previous button. So let's head back over to our code. So we'll start by giving all our previous button a class of previous button. Then we'll select all our previous button and loop through them. Then add a click event listener to all our previous button. All we're just going to do in this function is scroll our quiz form container backward. So that's it. Let's test this out in our browser. So that seems to be working. So that's it for this video. We successfully have our fully functional quiz app built. Please, if you really enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and also kindly give us a comment in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.